Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and today you get to see me on camera because my PowerPoint isn't loading. Fortunately, it's not a big deal because today I wasn't actually going to even do a PowerPoint. Instead, we're going to be taking a look at building web applications and building mobile applications and modifying them. And basically, what is the quickest way to go from zero to an application? We're going to show you that today. It's actually based on a couple of webinars that I did last year, when I have it, July and August of last year, where I showed you how to put together an application using the Web Security Genie. Then we showed you how to turn it into a mobile capable application. And then we showed you how to modify the login screen to give it the look and feel that you wanted. So I've gone through those, I've edited them down, and I put together what I think is now a nice succinct presentation of how you go from zero to app all in one go. But I'm also here to answer questions. So if you've got any questions, go ahead and type them into the questions box or the chat box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So I'm going to get started, and this is going to be a video. Now, I know a couple of you have got issues with videos, and I'm sorry, it'll show up during the recorded webcast if you can't hear them now. But before I go any further, can someone just let me know whether or not you can hear my voice? That's all I need to hear today. And just let me know in the questions box, just to make sure that everything is coming through smoothly before I start. I see a hand raised, but if you could just let me know in the questions box or the chat window whether or not I'm coming through on audio, that would be great. And I'm not hearing anything. So if anyone wants to let me know whether or not you can hear me, that would be superb. There we go, audio and visual. Okay, cool. Oh, good, they're all flooding in. I think there's a little delay, no problem at all. All right, so we're gonna get going. If you're wearing headphones, mind your audio. Sometimes videos play back at a higher rate. I don't want to blast your eardrums, so let's get going here. The first one that we're going to begin with is what I call building an app from scratch, and I'll be here for questions. This may take a second to load. Oh, there we go. The tabbed UI interface is terrific, and it's great for building web applications. The problem is that it's not terribly responsive, so it doesn't work very well on mobile, where you've got smaller screen sizes. So today what we want to do is we want to take the tabbed UI component that Alpha built us and create a new version of it as a UX component. But we want to reuse as much work as we possibly can. So we want to make this as easy on us as possible. So by the end of today, we will have basically taken all the functionality out of here and put it into there. And then in a follow-up webinar, we're going to take this new UX webinar and we are going to style it so that it looks sharp. We're going to create some places where you can add your own content. And we'll really just make it a great getting started tool for anyone who wants to build a new application. All right, so let's start with where we started last week. I'm going to pop over here to my machine. And I'm actually just going to quickly review what we did last week, which was, we did a new project here in the Web Projects control panel. So we did it using clicking the right button, not that one. Yeah, new project, here we go. Let's call this webinar test. And we said we wanted to enable the security framework. I showed this to you last week, so I'm going to go through it just very quickly right now, just as a review. When we did that, we decided to let these defaults alone. We decided that we wanted to use an extended user information table. We connected it to a connection string that we had already built. This time it was Northwinds. And we said that we wanted to create some system tables. In particular, we were interested in the active users one. Again, for that, we needed to specify a connection string. Once all that was done, I said, yes, enable the security framework. Security framework has been enabled. And it ended up building out, yes, I do. And it ended up building out basically our interface. Okay on that, and here we go. So here we'll take a look at the web components that it built for us. It built a series of UXs, one for resetting the password, one for showing you how many active users are logged in, one for deciding on two-factor authentication. These were all built as separate UXs. So let's go ahead and dive into one and just take a look at it. Let's take a look at reset password, for example. So reset password, yep, create it back up. Reset password is a fairly simple UX component. And if we look at it in working preview, it won't let us do anything because you're not currently logged in. But basically what it did is it would have a box for username and password. Let's go back into design to show it to you. So here's the new password. This is a confirmation of the password. There's the reset button. And that's all it did, was it reset the password. That's all this UX component was needed for. So we had one for there. We had one for, like I said, basically 5 other areas as well. And we put them into, or Alpha did that for us. We put them into a master tabbed UI interface. Let's click on the tabbed UI interface, and I'll show you what that looks like. Now, a tabbed UI interface is a really, really easy way to build a web interface that calls the different UXs that you've put together. So to do that, in this case, all they did was they added a button here up at the top, and then they added some additional buttons that opened up each of these UXs. So they just basically went over here, tabbed UI buttons, and they said, okay, I would like to open a component. And they chose, say, the active users component. They clicked OK. And then that was added to the list. And if I went into working preview, it would appear here. I can't use that one, unfortunately, because that one is restricted to an admin. I'm not logged in as an admin. Sorry, bad example. But that's really all it takes to put together a master tabbed UI. You just go in, choose the component. You can organize them into frames like we've done here. And that's it. The only other thing I want to point out is there's a logout button up here at the top. When you click it, it invokes a piece of JavaScript which logs you out of the application and brings you back to the home page. So like I said, this is great, and let's go ahead and run it. Save changes, nope. And let's just see what it looks like. So when I'm going to say that we want to run it and we want to go to login A5W. This is the first page in our project. And so this should open up in a browser at our login screen. Let me close these other tabs so I don't confuse myself. Oh, me too. And I will log in. Again, it showed us what the usernames and passwords were that it created for us by default. So user1 at alpha.com. This person is set up as an admin. If I log in, here is that tabbed UI that it created. Now let's take a look at that tab UI. I think I showed you something last week where you could go into active users, for example, and we'll go ahead and refresh the data, and it can show you what's been going on, who's been logging in, who's been using the system, provided you are an administrator. But as I pointed out, this is great on web, but it wouldn't be great on mobile. And here's why. Let's say you're shrinking the screen size down to what might be a phone size. Take a look at that. You really just can't read any of the stuff here in this chart. And we're wasting an awful lot of space here on the left with the navigation, which you wouldn't do typically in a mobile app, but actually works great in when you do have the real estate, because you can quickly check and move from option to option. So the question is, how do we get this into a format that will work nicely on a phone? And for that, we're going to go ahead and build a UX to do that. So I'm going to actually switch back over to my default, where I have pre-built a UX here called the master UX, and we're going to take a look at that. Let's go into controls. And so the master UX looks like this. If I go into working preview, let's open this up, you'll see that I don't have, okay, this is the home UX component. You'll see that, like the tabbed UI, I'm loading components onto the screen, some subcomponents that were already built for me by the security genie. But instead of having all of that navigation space wasted here, I put it here into a menu. So here I'm allowed 2 things, home and log out, and that's only because I'm logged in as a person who doesn't have permissions to see other things. So let's go ahead and do a live preview, because that'll give us a better example. Let's do live test, log in. Okay, user1 at alpha.com, user1 alpha. All right, so now I'm logged in. Now I'm logged in now to the UX version. And if I take a look at the menu, I have the same menu choices that I had in the tabbed UI. So let's say I wanted to go to active users. I could click on active users, and there they are. And as you can see, let me go ahead and refresh the data. If I take this and I shrink it down, it becomes actually still quite readable on a phone. And if you're holding that phone in landscape mode, even the summary data looks fine. So let's, oh, sorry, even the detailed data looks fine. Let's go ahead and choose detail. And you'll see that's actually quite readable. And we could have even optimized this UX a bit more to make it even more readable on the screen. And in fact, we'll probably do that in our next session when we style the application. So the question is, how do we actually build something like this? Well, we do that by creating a new UX. Start with a new UX. I'll start here right from scratch. And I will go ahead and I'm going to insert what we call a panel navigator. So if you'll recall, when we had a tabbed UI interface, when you clicked on options, they'd appear in windows on the right. We use a different that you could then close. In UXs, we tend to use what are known as panel cards. And I know I've done a session on panel cards before, but let's go ahead and put in a panel navigator. And let's add in a panel card. And we'll insert that after. And now I've got a panel card. The card and the navigator hang out here as a set. The card contains the information that we want to show, and the navigator lets us go from card to card. Right now, we just have one card. In my other example, though, you'll see, let me close that one. You will see you'll see that I've built a bunch of cards. I built a card called Home. I built a card called Activity. I built a card called Extended Info, one called Two-Factor, one called Change Password, and so on all the way down. And I think I did one for logouts. I didn't do a logout card. I do have an option for it, though. The other thing I did when I put together this interface was I inserted into the panel navigator, I put in a panel header. And I think I just right-clicked to choose that, and I chose panel header, and it created it for me. And inside that panel header, which I'll show you in working preview, which is up here, this is I put in what we call a navigation bar. And I know that's something that we covered earlier in this year, but we'll take a look at it again today. So in this control bar, let's double click on that. A control bar is made out of basically your control bar layout, of which you can have multiple, is designed up here in the control bar layout section. And here you can add and edit lines to it. You can decide, oops, I'm going to say edit line. You can decide what's going to come at the before, the middle, or the after on the menu bar. What we've done in our menu bar is we've had a piece of static text, which I call HTML title, and a nav menu, which I'm going to show you how to edit in just a second. And those went together and to create a menu that looks like this, like the one that you just saw. Okay, so each of these two things here are called items. This first one was an HTML item. The second one was a menu item. And those get created over here in the Items tab when you're inserting one of these control bar controls. For the HTML title, all I did was I said add control bar item, and I chose the HTML title as the option. And all I did here was I just placed HTML text that said admin UX version. Not a very exciting piece of text, but that's it. The nav menu, however, is kind of interesting. So here's the nav menu. And again, I just added that by saying add control bar item. And this time you could say button or drop-down menu. And that's what I chose. I chose that option there. And when we're here in the nav bar menu, when you insert one of these, you get to define the menu definition. And the menu definition, you actually have a couple ways of defining it. But one way, probably the most popular, is using the menu builder. So we're using the menu builder. I just click here and I can start adding the items that I'd like to have appear in my menu. So I have home, extended information, two-factor authentication, change password, and all of those things that I've had here before. Now, if you recall, so here's how you add an item. It's actually really simple. You just say, click Add Item. Say it's assembling, and I'm going to call this my new item. And now that'll just appear in the menu. But if you want it to actually do something when it appears in the menu, you have to hook up a little bit of JavaScript to it. And the JavaScript that you're going to hook up is the JavaScript used to select the active panel. So for each of these, as I pointed out, I created separate panels for them, separate panel cards. So when I click on one of these buttons, like let's say change password, and I look at its OnClick event, you'll see I put in this one bit of JavaScript called dialog.object panel set active, and that takes a parameter called change password. How did I know this? Am I good at remembering JavaScript? I am not. I use the helper tools that are here in Edit Actions, so let me show you that right now. If you want to insert a UX component method, like we've done here, just click here and it will give you an interface which will let you search for them. So I happen to know that it was called set panel, no, set active panel. Yeah, here we go, panel set active. And I basically, all I had to do is I had to select that from the list. It pasted it in for me. And then when I erased the parameters and I put in like a space, you'll see this menu appears. And here it asks me which UX panel I want to activate. I right click, I choose the one that's appropriate. In this case, we run change password, so I would choose change password. I'm not going to do that now because obviously it's already working. So save changes. So that's how you add those little JavaScript bits to it, and that's how you tell it to get from one place to the other. It's a really simple way. You create one panel card for each part of your application that you'd like to navigate to. You build a menu that lists out those panel cards, and then you use the OnClick event so that when you choose that menu item, it goes right to that panel card. All right, so I'm going to cancel out of here. I don't need to save those changes. Right. And so the result is basically a system where I can move from panel card to panel card. Now, we've talked about, let's see what else we want to go over. So there's one other sort of tricky thing that you want to say. It's not really that tricky, but if in your panel card, in your control bar in the nav menu, one of our navigation choices is called logout. Here it is right here. Now logout works a little bit differently from the other choices. It is in fact an Ajax callback that logs out the application and then passes back in a command telling it to then go back to the login page. We talked about Ajax callbacks, I think 3 weeks ago, but I'm going to show it to you again, just so you see how it works. So when I'm saying logout, this OnClick event is going to run a little action that I've called logout. Let's go take a look at that action in depth. Bang, bang. And that would be over here under JavaScript actions. So I created a JavaScript action to run. It's like a little JavaScript snippet. Did it over here. And I created one called logout. Let's go ahead and edit that action and show you how it's built. So this is action JavaScript. So this is one of the actions that I could have added. One is called Ajax Callback. You'll see there are a whole bunch of other actions that button could have performed, or that script could have performed. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to edit the action for the Ajax callback. And if you recall, the structure for an Ajax callback typically is you have it call an internal or a server-side function. So when this script is run, it's going to run a server-side function. It's going to pass in information or any data that I might need from the form is going to get passed back. I actually don't need any in this case because this is just a logout component. And then to do this, I then created what my xbasic function would be. So it's going to call a function. It's going to get a result from that function. That function is going to be JavaScript. It'll execute that JavaScript. Let's take a look at the function declaration because it's actually really simple. All I need to do to log out is I need to make one call up here called context security.logout. That's that context security object you might know about. This command will log you out, but it only logs you out on the server, so you don't actually know anything has happened on the browser side until you actually try to do something else. What you typically do, though, is once you log someone out, is you don't just leave them on that same page. You bring them back to the login screen. And to do that, I've just put in a very simple piece of JavaScript, which is window.location.href, and then the name of the page I'd like it to go back to, the login page. All right, so I know some of you could or could not see that video, but it looks like most of you could, which was great. Hopefully in the recording, everything will turn out just fine. Do we have any questions on that section? And if not, we're going to jump into the next one. We're going to show you actually how to style the application and specifically the login screen. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one right now. But of course, I'm also here in the background with questions to answer your questions. So go ahead and type them in if you've got them. And here we go for customizing the login screen. So this is the login page to our application. And right away, we want to make some changes to this. So one of the changes that we'd want to make would be just simply the background color, the background graphic. The other thing we want to make changes to would be probably actually the field labels themselves. For one thing, if you're going to ask for a user ID, but you know that the user ID is going to be the email address, it's much easier for the user to simply specify email instead of user ID so that they don't think that they have forgotten a piece of information. Next up, this is sort of an old style button, this capsulated style. So, you know, again, this is just a matter of taste, but we kind of like to make this modern, maybe make it square, give it a solid color. These down here, these are links for forget password and create account, but they're not standard link colors. And it's actually good practice if you're going to make something a hyperlink to make it the color that people will expect. And that color is basically just pure blue and have it be underlined. So I'd like to make some tweaks like that. And then, of course, if we do replace the background picture, we want to do it with something that still loads quickly in the browser. Pictures can take up a lot of space. So let's go and see what we could do as an alternative. So here is an example of a change. So let's imagine the business is Bob's Bikes. Bob's Bikes makes and manufactures bike parts. And maybe this is where their supplier is going to log into Bob's Bikes. Let's just imagine that for a moment. So you see what we've done here is we've traded out the background image. We have made this a square button. I still don't know if I love the shading, but I'll show you how we can fix that. We squished down this box here to get it to fit in our clip art piece. And we changed these to look like regular HTML icons. So I'm going to show you how you basically turn this into this. And then with that knowledge, you can go ahead and create anything you want in terms of your login screen. So let's go ahead and dive directly into the software. And let me just take a look. What else we've got here? Okay, great. Just looking at questions. So here we are in a web project, and this is a web project that we built a few weeks ago. I have two web projects in this workspace. One's called Default, and one is called Webinar Test. Webinar Test is the one that we worked on together. I'm going to go ahead and do a live test on this, and I'm going to go right to the login page. And when that loads, I should see my familiar login page. Whoops, I'm seeing a new login page. Let's go take a look at that component itself, because I have a feeling that was just cached in my browser. And sure enough, it was cached in my browser. Okay, great. So here are the things that there are a bunch of things here that we want to change. So the first thing that we'd probably want to change would just be the background image. So I went over to iStock Photo, where I have an account, and I bought a background image. And I recommend purchasing your background images in stock, especially for websites, because it is not worth getting caught and having to basically pay fines for work that isn't yours, and it's not the right thing to do. You can get iStock images for a couple bucks each. They're not expensive. So I chose this one, which I thought was kind of cool. It's like a bike, and it looks like there was a chalkboard or something, and I sort of envisioned, well, I could just plop the user interface into that. So the only thing I really had to do to this image was I added this text here. And then when I saved the image out, because I got a very high quality image from iStock, I decided when I was saving, and you have these same options in Photoshop and in other products as well. When you choose JPEG, you can choose what compression level you're going to want. So I think the original was something ridiculous. It was much higher than that. I think it was like 2 megabytes or something like that. I don't want people to download a 2 megabyte picture that's just a background. So I squished it down to about 100 and what did I get it down to? 160. Probably could have done better than that, but definitely squish down an image if you're going to replace it. It's just something you should remember, because otherwise you're going to be expending a lot of bandwidth really for no good reason. Okay, with that in hand, I took the picture and I put it into my web projects control panel so that it appears in my files here. And I called it, let's go to images. Default, we're going to go to images, images, here we go. I think I called this one Bob's Bikes. Yeah. And to get that there was a couple ways you can do it. I tend to like using this open project folder in Windows Explorer because it just takes me directly to the folder that I need. It just makes it easier for me to copy and paste things into here, especially since I'm used to working with Explorer anyway. So I put that into the component. But the thing I needed to update then was the component so that it pointed to this new place. And so let's go back to the webinar test. That's our original. And we'll take a look at web components. We'll go into the login component, and we're going to edit that. We're going to go into the design. And you'll see the way that this is structured is it's basically a panel navigator with some panel cards in it. And a lot of the sections in these panel cards are actually hidden. They only appear when they're necessary. For example, login errors is a section which simply doesn't appear unless there are errors that are there, and it'll make it appear. Likewise, there are two buttons here for login. One button lets you do a Google login, and the other one is just the traditional Alpha Anywhere login. And in this case, we have the Google login one shut off. I would like to take a look, though, at Google login in a future webinar to show you how that works. All right, so if we're looking up here at the panel card, you'll notice that the panel card has got in its properties something called an image name, and that is the background image for that panel card. Now, this image is not pointing to an image name. It's actually pointing to, if I open it up, if I can, a whole bunch of, I call it gobbledygook, but basically it's 64-bit encoded picture. You can make a 64-bit encoded picture by simply going to a website. If you simply go to Google and you say 64-bit encoder or something like that, I won't even bother. You can create a string like that. But I didn't really, and that's fine. And the nice thing about it is that if you're going to use this login component again and again, you just have to copy the login component. You don't have to copy an external image. However, I prefer to use an image that I've stored separately. That way I can always update the image. So instead of using that, let's pop back into my other project. Oh. Instead of using that, we'll go to login here. I simply used an image called Bob's Bikes. And to do that, I just simply selected image in web project or style. Then I clicked the select button, chose select from web project folder, and those were my options right here, these three. So let's just so you can see them. All right, I'm going to cancel out of that. So that's all it took to replace the image. I created an image. I made sure that I shrunk it down in terms of resolution so that it loaded quickly. I put a label on it. I copied it into the project, and then I referred to it right here in that panel card under image name. So that part is taken care of. The other thing that we wanted to take care of was the username, the button for the username. So let's take a look at that. There are two, I'm sorry, the login button called login. There are two here. Here's the first one is called button 1, and that's actually the one we're interested in. The second one is called login with Google. I'm not using that in this case, so we're just going to ignore that. So right here, we have a couple choices here, and it starts out with a button class. Let me show you the old one so that you remember what we're changing it from. Let's go back to my webinar test. The button. And you'll see that the button was defined as using the project style, which I believe is alpha in this case, and it had a sub-theme called capsule raised. And I could have just simply changed that. One of the ones that I like is like primary is actually a nice one, and that's good. But what we did instead was I built my own CSS class for my button. And it was really pretty easy to do, and it's something that's pretty handy to know about. So I'm going to show you how that was done. I'm going to pop over here to default, go back into the login, take a look at that button, and then we're going to go take a look at this button class called login button plain. So when I click on the button class, it shows all the classes that have been applied to this object. In this case, it's just this one. And so I just defined the CSS by clicking Edit Local CSS. That opens up this editor, and I basically added this text in myself. So there's the selector, login button plain. I said I don't want it to have a border. I wanted that as the blue color that you see there. I want the text to be white. I added some padding so that there was some space between the text and the top and bottom and edges of the box. I changed the font size, and I changed the font weight to bold. I didn't need to bother changing the font family. That's already inherited by the style, and it already looks pretty good. So that's all it took there to make that change, was creating a new class. Now, when you create a new class, this is something that people mess up all the time. You might come in here and say, oh, look at these classes. I'm going to choose this one, login button plain. You think that you've selected it and you think you've clicked OK, but really you haven't. In fact, you can see here it's blank. And that's because you need to make sure that you've added it to the selected CSS class names over here in order for that to work. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. We're going to put that back in. Nice. So that took care of the logo button. The next thing we wanted to fix was the forget password and the create account hyperlinks. So those are here, and I'm going to leave and exit out. Don't have to save. We'll go back into our old project. And just as a reminder, this is what it looks like when you are previewing it. There is a forgot password and a create account link here at the bottom. And these are fine, except that we wanted the color to be the proper link color, and we wanted them to be underlined. So we didn't really have to make big styling changes there. Let me show you what we did, though, to do that. So I'm going to close. We're going to go back into the default, pop back into login, and we are going to go take a look at that forget password link. And so what I did here is I basically changed the hyperlink text style. I'm going to click on that. And there's actually a builder that you can use for this if you want to. And the builder is handy because, for example, if you didn't remember, what things are called, like text decoration or something like that, you can use the finder for that, and it'll build out the code for you. So here all I did was set text decoration to underline, and I set the color to #00F, which, RGB means that it's just basically going to be a pure blue color. And so when we preview that, we should see that we get pure blue color with an underlined text as well. Now, the next thing we needed to do is we wanted to change basically the spacing that we had here between logo and forget password. It looks fine now, but that's because we've added some spacing to it. And we did that, I believe we did that up here in, oh, never mind. We'll get to that in a second. The next thing we want to take a look at is, oh yeah, the field label. That was an easy one. So field label, user ID. If you ever want to find properties up here, it's always good to use this little search box. I'm just going to type in label. There's the label, and you'll see I've changed it to email, which is what we wanted to do. And then the last thing, which isn't something that you actually saw on the slide, is the page title. Let me show you what I mean by that. Here we are in the default project. Let's go back to webinar test, and we'll say live test. Okay. Let's clear. And this may be cached, so if it is, then we'll do it a different way. Yeah, this is cached. All right, never mind. Actually, but this isn't too bad because it does still have the problem. Up here it says UX. We want this to say something like Bob's Bikes. So how do you change that? Probably a lot of you know how to do that, but let me just show you in case you don't. When you are in the project, in your project here, that login page is actually going to be embedded into an A5W page because, well, that's just how Alpha works. No web component runs by itself. It only runs, unless it's like in a preview window, when you're actually running it on the web, it's always embedded inside a web page. And in this case, that web page is called login. And that is created for you automatically when you used the security framework to build out your application. So we're going to go ahead and edit that. Let's just jump right into the source. And right up here, to add the title to any page, this is just basic HTML, is within the head tag, you're going to add another tag called title. Then you're going to type in what you actually want to appear. So it's going to be Bob's Bikes. What's that? And I'm going to go ahead and save it. And let's do another test. And there we have it. It says Bob's Bikes up here in the tab like it's supposed to. And the very last thing was I had to shrink down this box a bit to get it to sort of fit neatly in here. If you remember, the old one was pretty wide. And I did that back here, default, back in that login component again. Nope, that's not the component, that's the page. Let me switch to pages. From pages to components. Here we go, login. And up here, the container for the login container, I made a change to that style. And I did a couple of things. First of all, I moved it up by setting a negative margin value. I had to play around with that a little bit to get it right. I decided that it should have a border around it. It should be solid. It should be white. Border radius is 10 pixels. This may have actually been created for me. But what I did change was I changed the width and I tied it to a maximum of 300 pixels. And this will actually show up just fine on a phone. I'll show you that in a second. The other thing I changed was opacity. You don't have to, but that's how transparent it's going to be against the background. Sometimes that's cool if you want to have the background image shine through. In this case, you're only looking at a blackboard, so the opacity just simply means it's a little bit darker. And then I had to tweak the margin on the right again to sort of make it fit neatly within the box. So I made all of those tweaks to that container right up there. So let's go ahead and see what this might look like if we were doing it on a phone. This will just be a simulation. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And again, we went through great effort, well, not some effort a few weeks ago to make the other application run smoothly on a mobile when you've got a smaller screen size. So let's take a look at this. If you shrink it down, you'll see it continues to behave in a way that's still pretty useful. All right, we are back. Do we have any questions? Hopefully most of you were able to see today's presentation. It should all show up in the video. Any questions on today? And if not, that'll do it. Looks like it. All right. Hey, thank you very much, everyone who showed up. Again, just as a reminder, you can always contact us at guides, GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. Hope to see you at our next Wednesday Alpha Software demo and Q&A webcast. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.